Hello, everyone. Right, yeah. Well, tonight, obviously, when I was reading Paul Krassner's articles, where he mentioned the rumours about CLA Drive, I found these claims made about a man named Charles Winans, as I found out his name is pronounced. And so, yeah, I looked into that, and I found a really good article that compiles loads of information about him, and also information about Charles Watson, because we don't talk about Charles Watson enough in relation to military intelligence involvement theories. It's everyone concentrates on Charles Manson when talking about that sort of thing, but actually there's quite a lot of sinister stuff about Tex as well. And so yeah, that's why I wanted to do this stream. Like I said, I found a really good article that puts it all in one place, and I'll probably separate this out into 2 streams because there's so much information. So yeah, anyway, and yeah, there won't be a live stream next week because I'm going to be on holiday, but I'll probably have time to edit some shorts while I'm away. So yeah, there'll be shorts posted and stuff like that. And I'm getting to reading pretty quickly because there's a lot to read out. But yeah, but obviously, yeah, Paul Krassner claimed that this man had met Charles Watson and brainwashed Charles Watson, and that it was actually him, not Charles Manson, that caused the Manson murders. Basically, is what he claims. And yeah, we'll look into those claims. But make sure you watch until the end as well, because we're going to talk about what May Brussell and Paul Krassner said about him, but then his response, because he sued Paul Krassner, and he sued Rolling Stone magazine and another magazine for publishing these claims about him. So yeah, make sure you listen to all the evidence. And yeah, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Wait a second. Since it's a text stream. There you go. Yeah, like I say, I'll get into reading pretty quickly. Hello everyone there. Yeah, we've got 43 people here already. Yeah, and this guy, there's a site called Substack, and this article has no comments or anything, so go and visit it and show him some love, yeah, if you're interested in the subject. It's quite recently published this year, he's written all this. So yeah, I'll get into it. Get that off the screen. Because there's so much to read out, we'll get straight into it. And then we can stop and discuss it at points. I'll break it up into a few parts because there's so much to read out. Charles Winans, an agent provocateur disguised as a hippie, moved to Carmel, California in November 1967. His home became a safe house for meetings with members of the Manson family, specifically Tex Watson. Winans orchestrated and Watson spearheaded the scenario of violence and witchcraft known as Helter Skelter. That's the most common picture of him, you see. Charles Francis Winans. Key points discussed in this article are: Louise James, a resident of Carmel, watched a family of hippies move into a house next door with the help of an army van. The head of the family was Charles Winans, a hippie artist from Texas. Suspecting the husband to be a government agent in disguise, James and her friend May Brussell watched the Winans family with earnest and sustained attention. After the Tate LaBianca murders in August 1969, Charles Winans set aside his hippie garb and became a postgraduate at the Navy's Monterey Language School. 4 months later, when pictures of accused Manson family murderers appeared in the news, Louise James recognized Tex Watson as a visitor at the Winans house. Susan Atkins met Charles Winans through Tex Watson. According to Atkins, Winans supplied dope to the Manson family. In 1972, Louise James was permanently disabled by a mind-altering drug, and May Brussell suspected her friend was silenced by the CIA. Charles Francis Winans, pronounced Winans, was born in Alice, Texas, May 14, 1939. As a teenager living in San Antonio, he had a passion for hot rods, building them, displaying them, and racing them. As an airman in the Air Force, he became an expert in cryptography and signal communication. In 1962, he married Carolyn Scriven, a divorced woman with 2 children. They went to California, first to Hollywood and then to Monterey, where Carolyn worked in a milk factory on Cannery Row. Returning to San Antonio in 1966, Charles partnered with his brother, Dan Boogie Winans, to open one of the first head shops in Texas, Grandma's Tea Shop, and Jomo Gallery. They sold buttons, piece bead necklaces, and vests that Carolyn herself sewed. The gallery had Dan's drawings, similar in style to those of R.H. Crumb. Charles's psychedelic artwork attracted the interest of local musicians. who were looking for new ways to promote their music. Composer Philip Crum said in an interview, "By 1967 I had teamed up with a great artist, Charles Winans, considered the original hippie in San Antonio. Old-timers in San Antonio still remember Charles and his outlandish ways." The following comments appeared on a San Antonio forum. "There was a guy named Winans living in Balcones Heights that drove a hearse as his personal car in the 60s. I also went to Sky with a guy named Boogie Winans. Would these be some of the same Winans brothers?" Charles was the talk of the neighbourhood with the hearse and his hippie lifestyle. His son attended Baskin GS and had shoulder-length hair, which caused an uproar. His mum would walk from school down from Balcones Heights Road to Crestview and to his street. I think she also looked and dressed hip. The following comment was posted on April 23, 2018 to the Contratext website regarding a book that Winans illustrated. The artist that illustrated the cover art for Faber's Child of Change is Charles Francis Winans. Charles was always an erudite, long-haired, bearded spearpoint probing at the establishment. Charles was done that, been there, creative consultant and guide for Don's Little Book in 1969. Charles started the first head shop in South Texas in 1966 in the front room of his art gallery, Grandma's Tea House, San Antonio. More underground newspapers from the east and west coast were distributed than zigzag cigarette papers. He considered himself as a watcher or modern member of the Counterculture Committee of Correspondence, spreading news of the military-industrial complex and their war in Vietnam. Charles also created the Electric Kiss light show at the Mind's Eye nightclub in San Antonio in 1966, and did light shows for bands like the 13th Floor Elevators, Conquerors, and Jefferson Airplane. Charles passed away in 2007. He was a creative enigma genius. In the summer of 1967, Charles and Carolyn and their 3 children, 2 from Carolyn's previous marriage and 1 of their own, left San Antonio and again moved to Hollywood, where Charles associated professionally with some of the most celebrated names in rock and roll. He produced light shows and created posters for, among others, Janis Joplin, Frank Zappa, Big Brother and the Holding Company, Chet Helms, Wavy Gravy, and the Velvet Underground. The Winans family spent several months at the log cabin in Laurel Canyon, a massive rustic building that once belonged to Western movie star Tom Mix. It was located at the corner of Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Lookout Mountain Road. The cabin burned down on Halloween 1981. The cause of the fire still remains mysterious. A picture of Charles Winans with a guitar seated among friends in the living room of the log cabin appears in an article called Strange Days in the Canyon, written by fellow Texan and close friend Richard Williams. The cabin was a frequent stopping point for rock stars who lived in the neighborhood. I managed the place for a year before splitting to San Francisco just before the Manson murders. Apparently Tex Watson had once knocked on the front door, but we wouldn't let him in. No, I found out on February 25th, 2022, that Richard Williams removed all references to Tex Watson and the Manson family from his article. Below is a screenshot of the original paragraph. It shows the paragraph he's removed there. Tex Watson, whose real name was Charles Watson, arrived in Laurel Canyon in September 1967, about 1 or 2 months after the Winans family. Born and raised in Texas, Watson was an outgoing, clean-cut young man who lived in Denton, Texas, where he was enrolled as a business major at North Texas State College. He also worked as a baggage handler for Braniff Airlines at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. When the spring semester ended, Watson got reacquainted with David Neal, a college fraternity buddy who had quit school and was living in Los Angeles. Neal saw Watson when he returned to Denton to visit his family. After hearing about life in California, Watson decided to check it out. He got a half-fare ticket from Braniff, one of the perks of his job, and flew out to Los Angeles to visit his friend. Subsequently, he used half-fare passes to make 3 more trips to Los Angeles. After his 4th trip, which occurred in the latter part of August, Watson decided to pack up his belongings and move to California. For 2 to 3 weeks, he stayed at the apartment shared by David and his brother Jay in the Echo Park district of Los Angeles, adjacent to the area of Silver Lakes. In mid-September, Watson started taking classes at Cal State Los Angeles, as well as working for a wig company. At the same time, he and David moved out of the Echo Park apartment and into a place in Laurel Canyon on Wonderland Avenue. Both Neal and Charles Watson testified at Watson's trial on September 1, 1971. Neither one offered specifics about the nature or precise location of the place they were staying at in Laurel Canyon. Apparently it was a place where mind control substances were being tested. From Neal's testimony, we were given some seeds from, testimony deleted here, rosewood seeds, I believe they were. We were on Wonderland and we were living in Laurel Canyon. It was about probably 2 hours after we had taken the seeds. I was laying down in my bedroom and I heard Charles jump up and he was hitting the wall. And as I opened the door, he ran out of his room and into the hallway, and there was a door to a bathroom. I don't recall if he kicked it. I think he hit it with his hand. But he put a hole through the door, and I grabbed him and began talking to him and wrestled with him for a moment and finally calmed him down. And he went back to bed, and I stayed in the room and talked with him for a few minutes, and that was it. When Watson was asked what the effect of the rosewood seeds had on him, he said, "Well, a lot of hallucinations. I remember the room came in on me completely, and it seemed like my head was in one little room. And the little room was around my head. And I remember I hit a door. I hit the door and put my hand through a door and kind of got mad at the guy who gave them to us, I never did anything like that or anything, and I couldn't understand why he had given me something that would make me do that." No doubt Neil was the placebo control subject, whereas Watson got the real stuff. Some researchers suggest that Watson and Neil stayed at a house located at 8584 Wonderland Avenue, about half a mile west of the log cabin at 2400 Laurel Canyon Boulevard. 1/2 mile in the opposite direction was a top-secret military facility that served as a haven for Hollywood celebrities and intelligence operatives. Lookout Mountain. I'm going to pause there for a minute, just have a break from reading, and unpack some of that. And I'm assuming if you're here, you know about Lookout Mountain, so I'm not going to read out the paragraphs about Lookout Mountain. But everyone knows Lookout Mountain was the place where they were supposedly making all the government propaganda films and all that. Just to what people were saying. Because, there's a lot of information about Tex there. I did find about rosewood seeds as well. He talks about that in his psychiatry report. He says he punched through the door. And rosewood seeds are actually jimsonweed seeds. Datura seeds. It's the same stuff. So it's interesting that he got given these seeds, yeah. So that's like the first time he took belladonna type drugs. Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing. People do question whether he was smuggling drugs with the stewardesses. And yeah, this guy doesn't mention Rosina at all as well, but she was associated with David Neal, I think. Sorry, just looking at the chat for a second, see what people are saying. Yeah, there was a lot of information there. But yeah, that's really good because it goes into, Texas background. No, well, when you look into it, really, he doesn't really have that much relevant military experience. And I think why he ended up being able to sue Paul Krassner was because they're wrong. He was actually in the Air Force, not the Navy, and he wasn't in intelligence. This is why he was able to sue them. But we'll get to that all in the end. But yeah, like I say, this article as well. Have a look at the page if you're interested in this sort of stuff, because he's written other stuff about May Brussell as well. And like I say, I'm not going to read all this out tonight because there's so much. There's enough for 2 streams at least. And I was able to find other stuff about Charles Winans. There's YouTube channels that have got videos of him. They've had hardly any views. Obviously, there's not been a lot of people looking for information on this guy. But yeah, there's a lot of accusations that he posed as an artist, but I think he really was an artist. There's a lot of evidence that he really was actually an artist, and he did do posters and album covers. Like they've already said, I've already read that out, haven't I? There is ample evidence that he really was an artist. But yeah, like I say, it's just interesting to hear more about Tex, isn't it? I just need a break for a second from reading, and then I'll start again. Yeah, but like I say, there's no need to read out the stuff about Lookout Mountain because everyone knows about Lookout Mountain, don't they? But yes, that's interesting that Charles Watson supposedly lived really near Lookout Mountain. And yeah, and they never identified whoever it was that gave them these rosewood seeds as well. So yeah, that's interesting. And like I say, that is in his psychiatry report too. And when I did finally find out what rosewood seeds are, that is another word for the datura seeds, the seeds on the datura plant, Yeah, I'll carry on reading. So I'm going to skip over this bit about Lookout Mountain because everyone knows about Lookout Mountain. But He gets back to, after spending 7 months in Laurel Canyon, Neil and Watson moved to a Malibu beach house at 18162 Pacific Coast Highway. In April or May of 1968, Watson met Dennis Wilson, a member of the Beach Boys. Wilson invited Watson to live at his house on Sunset Boulevard. There, Watson met Charles Manson and his girls. In September, Watson went to Spahn Ranch and became a member of the Manson family. Shortly afterwards, Neil went to see Watson at the ranch and noticed something different about his friend. I had noticed a bit of a change in his personality. He was beginning to have an absence of emotion. He had a very blank look on his face. I know he was taking acid. He had become to take a great deal of acid. In November of 1968, Charles Manson sent Watson up north to visit the Candyman. Charlie had sent us up north to see a man called the Candyman and going to bring back some candy. So we went up north, and Charlie wasn't with us then, like he had told us to go up there and see about the candy. And so a couple of guys and I and some of the girls went up north in a school bus. We got back down from north, and this is when I called Dave. I came back down from north in the school bus, and I had been away from Charlie for a little while because he sent us up to the Candyman to get candy, and I came back down and I called David, and I told him that I was just losing myself. Further details of this episode are given in Neil's testimony. He had gone through a complete reversal of anything that he ever believed as far as Manson, it seemed. He was almost frightened over the phone and asked me if there was room for him to come and stay. He was afraid of the girls and also of Manson. He said he was frightened. He was frightened of what Manson and what the girls were doing, and he felt that he was going insane, and could he come and stay with me? When Watson was at David's apartment in Highland Park, they had discussions about Charles Manson. We talked of Manson's philosophy, and talked of the hold that he seemed to have on him, and the hold that he seemed to have on the people who were at the ranch. And I remember explicitly Charles saying that he felt he was losing his identity, didn't really know who he was when he was there. On December 2nd, David was inducted into the army. Watson continued to stay at the Highland Park apartment with David's brother for about a month and a half. In February or March, and Rosina was there as well, he doesn't mention Rosina, Watson returned to Spahn Ranch and rejoined the Manson family. In June of 1969, Neil was home on leave, having just got his orders to go to Vietnam. He made a phone call to Spahn Ranch trying to get in touch with Watson, but failed to reach him. Watson later called David's brother and found out that David was staying at a friend's house. Watson went to visit Neil with 3 Manson girls, one of whom being Patricia Krenwinkel. When Neil first saw Watson, he could not recognize him. Physically, he had lost a great deal of weight, he was smoking cigarettes, which I had never seen him do, and he had a stare, absence of emotion almost. He asked me to come to the ranch and to live, and he explained Charles Manson's philosophy, which was now his, and he explained Helter Skelter, and he told me that there was going to be a revolution in the country, and that it was happening in this country was in a matter of months. His appearance in conversation disturbed me, mainly because he had completely lost his identity from the Charles that I knew. It wasn't the same person. Watson's zombie-like enslavement to Charles Manson was actually a ploy to conceal his dedicated commitment to the Helter Skelter plan. Excuse me. The mind control that he suffered did not rob him of his mental faculties, but rather it turned him into a ruthless killer. Helter Skelter was basically a false flag operation. The Manson gang would invade the homes of rich white people, slaughter them, and leave behind clues that indicated initially that the Black Panthers were to blame. Later, the blame for the murders would fall on the hippies. Although the killers came out of Spahn Ranch, the actual direction and control of this complex plan came out of a safe house in Carmel, 300 miles away. The Winans family had been living in Carmel since November 1967, 4 years later, when they were living in Pacific Grove, 13 miles from Carmel Valley. Mae Brussell mentioned a hippie provocateur on her radio program, Dialogue Conspiracy, October 13th, 1971. I had a friend I met who worked at the Diggers, and they were being handed bad acid by disguised agent provocateurs to begin to burn their bellies and rob their minds. And that's the way the Diggers were being treated up there. This can be documented. I know that the federal government were throwing things out at pop festivals. They allowed people like Melvin Belly, who worked with Jack Ruby, was the man on Altamont, on the Altamont thing. That brings the pressure. We'll go on to that some other day, on pop festivals and music, and what happened to the music scene and the musicians at the Monterey Pop Festival. So I was watching how the hippie scene would be put down and what evidence there was that they had to crack it. I've mentioned on 2 different programs that in my neighborhood a man moved in from Texas. I think he gets tired of me talking about this, so this is the last time I'll mention him. He was dressed as a hippie, but he wasn't a hippie. He brought his children into the community. He lived a block from my house. He wrote a book for Henry Kaiser called Children of Change. I'm repeating for somebody who hasn't heard the show. A non-hippie from Texas. He lived here for about 1 or 2 years, walking down the coast, going through the music scene. And he wrote, just prior to the Sharon Tate murders, that hippies would have made it. And this is what Henry Kaiser published. Would have made it if, number one, they had a sense of humour, and number two, they weren't so violent. If anybody had a sense of humour, that generation did, because there wasn't much to be funny about, the way the Cold War was going after Korea and everything like that. I have a button collection. People who've been to my house see it. I started this around those years, and I have a whole wall of thousands of buttons, and it's funny. They did have a sense of humour. The kids were beautiful and they laughed. They were very funny things. If you read the button, it says sociological things. I have the sense of humour of that generation, and I collected the car bumper stickers for a while, but it got too expensive, so I saved the buttons. They did have a sense of humour. There was no violence at all. This same particular man referred to his wife and hippie women as witches, and she wasn't a witch. She was a very established Texas girl who was the wife of this man that was dressed as a hippie. He is now at the Navy postgraduate school. He's Navy. He had to be Navy Intelligence. How did he get into the Navy postgraduate school if his undergraduate school was being a hippie in Big Sur Road, walking back and forth on the highway? So this particular man had his gun and his scopes and his knives and things, and I watched, and there was no massacre, and I was watching the phenomena. How was our government going to handle it? According to Brussell, the non-hippie from Texas wrote the book Children of Change. Actually, the author was Don Faban and Winans the illustrator. This fact does not necessarily preclude the possibility, as indicated by Brussell, that Winans had a hand in guiding and helping Faban in the composition of this book. See, that's the front cover of the book. Excuse me. And that's the back cover. Right, and I'll just read this last bit out before we get into another article. Brussell did not reveal on her programme the name of the phony hippie from Texas, but she revealed it privately to Paul Krassner, publisher of The Realist. According to Adam Gorightly, author of the book The Shadow over Santa Susana, May Brussell informed him, Krassner, that a Naval Intelligence agent named Nathaniel Tate, a pseudonym, had associated with Tex Watson prior to the murders. Tate, Brussell claimed, was a postgraduate at the Navy's Monterey Language School, where only intelligence officers were admitted. Tate, she said, had used the cover of a hippie artist while working as an undercover agent provocateur to infiltrate Charlie's family. According to Brussell, Tate was the Manson family's main drug supplier. After the murders, Tate cut his hair and put his shoes back on and returned to the Monterey Language School, setting aside his hippie guise, which had served its purpose. Prior to shedding these hippie trappings, Tate had done artwork for an underground magazine that Brussell asserted was a conduit for CIA funds for medical research in mind control, intelligence money for electrode implants, and for LSD experiments, according to documents I got from the Pentagon. Paul Krassner revealed the names of the hippie artist from Texas in an article written for Rolling Stone. Right, yeah, and I'll have a break for a second now. But yeah, again, still loads to unpack, obviously. Yeah, that is confusing. Well, a badge is something else to Americans, isn't it? A badge is like a policeman's badge or a security guard's badge or something, innit? It means status. That's why they call that a button, isn't it? Yeah, what we call a badge. But yeah, these things May Brussell's saying as well, the claim she's making that he wasn't an artist and he just posed as an artist. You can actually, it's provable he really was an artist. And he remained an artist right up until his death, basically. So yeah, she's wrong about that. But it's still interesting, yeah, to read about all this. And like I say, he's an interesting bloke, and I do think it's plausible that he met the Manson family and might have supplied them drugs, but I'm not convinced he's the one that's responsible. Yeah, that's it. See, a badge is what sheriffs wear. A badge means something else to Americans, doesn't it? Yeah. But we call, what you call buttons, we call that a badge. But yeah, a badge means something else, yeah. to Americans, yeah. But yeah, like as we'll get into, because we see his response to all these claims basically when he sues them. And even May Brussell says Krassner was, yeah, that's it. Americans don't need no stinking badges. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Hmm. Oh God. What, he had a meltdown at Tuna? What, on air did he? Oh no. God, yeah, and like I say, a lot about Tex there to digest, because we don't talk about Tex enough, basically, yeah. All the stuff he was getting up to with Dean. Like I say, it's a bit disappointing he doesn't mention Rosina. And yeah, oh yeah, I will read out what he says. Yeah, because this is the article that he got sued over, the My Trip with Squeaky, just one of Charlie's girls. This is what all the trouble was about. Well, the guy sued Rolling Stone, and it looks like they settled it out of court because May Brussell would have been called as a witness. But I've got an article to read out about that. It's a crazy rabbit hole, like, yeah. Yeah, this is it. I wonder if Brussels mixed up this guy and Dina, who actually was in the US Navy in Hawaii and was charged for statutory rape by hypnosis. Maybe. Like I say, I think it does sound like this woman. Like I say, when I get into the part two, I'll get into more detail about what this woman said as well. May Brussels' friend, who was the guy that lived right next door to Winans, and that's where a lot of it came from. Yeah. Yeah. So much to read and watch. There is so much information out there now. It's crazy. You know. Yeah, that's it. Oh, it's unclear who this Candyman guy is as well. Strange name. Strange way to say it. And was that in his court testimony? Is that where he got that from? Weird words to be using in court, isn't it? Yeah. The amount of time he repeats Candyman and Candy as well was weird. Yeah. Yeah, when I say all this stuff predates chaos, though, you know what I mean? People were saying this back in the 70s, so like there's loads more. Because, yeah, Tom O'Neill didn't really go into Tex at all, did he? There's all this about Tex as well. And what the hell happened with Tex? Yeah. Right, but I'll get on with reading this out. Because there's so much to read out. Right, now where was I? Yeah, May Brussell informed him, Krassner, that a Naval Intelligence... Oh yeah, I've read that, haven't I? So he was the main drug supplier. And Krassner revealed the names of the hippie artist from Texas in an article written for Rolling Stone, October 23rd, 1975, entitled My Trip with Squeaky, just one of Charlie's girls. I had hoped to get confirmation of the heaviest lead in my research. I'd been tracking down the path of Charles Winans, an individual in Navy intelligence who had posed as a hippie artist, orchestrating the scenario of violence and witchcraft in meetings with Tex Watson, who then fulfilled the prophecy of this agent provocateur with all that shooting and stabbing. Manson had merely instructed his ladies to go and do whatever Tex told them. Further in the article, Krassner said he went to California Institute of Women and interviewed a trio of convicted Manson killers, Leslie Van Houten, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel. When I asked about Charles Winans, Susan Atkins replied, "Oh yeah, Tex took me to sleep with him, and he gave us dope." Was Charles Winans the Candyman? Charles Winans brought a libel suit against Krassner and the Rolling Stone in 1976. A discussion of that suit appeared in the New West magazine, April 10th, 1978. In a short notice by Laura Bernstein entitled "Hustlers Krassner, Stone Broke, is Sued for Libel." Flamboyant San Francisco attorney Melvin Belli will be in court this summer. He is now seeking damages of $450 million in a libel suit against the publishers of Rolling Stone magazine. The case, scheduled to be heard in June, stems from a 1975 article about Squeaky Frome, her botched attempt to assassinate President Gerald Ford, and her Manson family companions. Called My Trip with Squeaky, just one of Charlie's girls, it was written by then writer, now Hustler editor, Paul Krassner. During Krassner's research into the Manson family, he stumbled across the name of Charlie Winans, whom Krassner described as his heaviest lead. Krassner wrote that Winans worked in Naval Intelligence and was an agent provocateur who posed as a hippie artist to the Manson family and orchestrated the scenario of violence and witchcraft. 6 months after his name appeared in Rolling Stone, Winans, 38, filed a suit in San Francisco Superior Court against the Straight Arrow Publishers, Inc. Scott Hansen, one of Winans' 3 attorneys, claims Charles never met any of these people, he never worked for Naval Intelligence, never met Susan Atkins. Krassner quoted Atkins as saying she was taken to sleep with Winans, and he's never talked to Rolling Stone. But he is an artist. He's designed record album covers, done oil painting, sculpture. The fact-checking at Rolling Stone was in conscious disregard of the truth. Rolling Stone's attorney, Jerry Doherty, responds, the research department at Rolling Stone did the best available work they could under the circumstances to check the truth of what Krassner wrote. Paul Krassner, reached at Hustler, says the libel suit was filed out of greed. Krassner says he has 4 sources for the information he printed about Winans. Noted conspiracy theorist Mae Brussell, Louise James, then Winans' next-door neighbour in Carmel Valley, California author Stan Ross, who allegedly told Krassner he saw Winans listed as an informant on a police record, and Susan Atkins. Krassner now admits that Stan Ross may have misunderstood and given Krassner information about someone else by mistake. According to Hansen, Susan Atkins denies naming Winans. Another of Winans' attorneys says Louise James couldn't substantiate any information. Winans' attorneys, who have seen copies of the Krassner manuscripts, agree there was careful checking of names and other information, but they claim that only Krassner and LA police report are written in the margin next to the 6 paragraphs that refer to Winans. They spent more time checking spellings than anything else, says attorney Hansen, and the name Winans is written across 1 page. Krassner says an editor at Rolling Stone had told him, we're diving headfirst into part 1 of the Patty Hearst story, which ran in the same issue. Krassner says there was a diversion of energy in terms of looking out for libel. I've always won them, says Krassner, of earlier libel threats, so my time may have come. Rolling Stone will be represented by the San Francisco firm of Pillsbury, Madison and Sutro. John Wenner, editor of Rolling Stone, and Joe Armstrong, former publisher, are also named as co-defendants. The magazine hired a separate attorney for Krassner, but he worries about the provision that says, he claims, that he must pay for counsel if he can afford it. Although he's reportedly making $90,000 at Hustler, Krassner says, I'm just starting to get out of debt. I think I have $34 to my name. A longer article by Laura Daltrey appeared in the New West on July 3rd, 1978, entitled Winans versus Rolling Stones. The complete article is given below. Yeah, and I've got this article here and he's transcribed it, so I'll read it out from here. We'll just take another break from reading for a second. So yeah, again, even more information. Yeah, and well, it gets to the point, basically, it comes out later that he wasn't studying at the school, he was working as an illustrator there under some kind of government unemployment scheme because he was an artist and his art wasn't selling. So he got employed there as an illustrator, but that comes out in this article that we're about to read. So they were totally wrong about what he was doing at the naval place. He was actually in the Air Force, not the Navy. And there was another reason. There was a mundane reason why he was at that naval academy. We'll get to that in a bit. Cool, yeah, once I've read this article out, that should be enough for this week. But yeah. Yeah, I've never heard anything about that guy Dina. We'll have to look into that as well, yeah. Because obviously we need a lot more research needs to be done into Tex and who he met. But yeah, I haven't actually seen any positive evidence that they really met the Manson family. It says Susan Atkins initially said she had met him, but then later denied saying that she had met him. And Squeaky said she'd never met him as well, so everyone else denied it. I don't know, has anyone asked Charles Watson if he met him? I don't know. That's it. But it's like I haven't seen any proof yet that he actually even met the Manson family. But like I say, when I get next week, I'll get in, well, it'll be the week after. The next stream I do, I'll get into all the stuff I found about the guy's life. And yeah, he does just look like an artist. Basically, yeah. Yeah. So just look at this chat for a second. Hello everyone. Welcome if you're new as well. And it's one of your First streams here. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Fact checking has long been a problem for Rolling Stone magazine, yeah, because it said, because they were running an article about the Patty Hearst trial. All their fact checking was done on that article and they let this one slip through, yeah. But yeah, that's a lot he was suing them for. But it never goes to court. But like you can see, Brussell starts calling him out and all that, And so it would have been like a media circus. So it looks like they settled it out of court. Yeah. Sorry, let me have a break from reading for a second. So I read better if I get to decompress for a second. But yeah, this article is really good. And it goes into what was going to be said in court, basically. And how, Krassner himself backpedaled. Brussell even says he was irresponsible to say this without further confirmation. Yeah. Yeah, that sort of thing happens a lot, yeah. Well, they get kids to sell drugs for them, don't they? Like I say, when I looked into the Acid King murders, I've not done a stream about that yet, but I want to do that one day. It's weird no one looked into who was, because Ricky Casso, the kid that did that, was supplying acid to all his friends, but who was giving him the acid? Older people must have been giving him the drugs, and it doesn't look like anyone ever actually really looked into that, and the people that was giving him the drugs. Yeah, anyway, I'll read out this final article. Right, let's see, I'll put this up in the group, the actual article. If you want to see a copy of the article. It's just been transcribed here. Winans versus Rolling Stone. Winans versus Rolling Stone, by Laura Daltrey. I seriously considered pleading insanity, says Paul Krassner, but I thought it would be a cop-out. Reporters sued for libel usually do not plead insanity as a defence, but Paul Krassner is not a run-of-the-mill Gazette reporter. After serving as editor of The Realist for 16 years, Krassner's reputation as a satirist was so well established that in 1974, when Krassner announced he'd secretly interviewed fugitive Patty Hearst, the FBI, whose agents were checking thousands of off-the-wall Hearst sightings, didn't even bother to phone him up. In articles, Krassner claims they did investigate him for that. Krassner recently fired from his job as a $90,000 a year publisher for Larry Flint's Hustler, has a new worry, in place of his old worry that whoever shot Flint would gun his way down to the masthead of Hustler. Along with Straight Arrow Publishers, Inc., publisher of Rolling Stone, Krassner is fighting a $450 million libel suit brought by a Texan who didn't take kindly to the things Krassner wrote about him in a 1975 article in Rolling Stone. Excuse me. Titled My Trip Was Squeaky, Just One of Charlie's Girls, the article detailed Krassner's 1972 acid trip with Manson family member Squeaky Frome, who had just gotten her name in the news again by levelling a pistol at then President Ford. The acid trip with Squeaky was just one research effort in Krassner's 1971-1972 investigation for a later abandoned book about the Manson case. His working theory, never substantiated, was that members of the Manson family were hitmen for the right and that the Tate LaBianca murders were designed to strike fear into the liberal Hollywood community that had supported Bobby Kennedy. Well, Krassner points out, the night Kennedy was shot, he had dinner with Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate. In the Rolling Stone article, Krassner wrote he had asked the Manson family about the heaviest lead in my research, Charles Winans, whom Krassner described as an individual in Navy intelligence who had posed as a hippie artist orchestrating the scenario of violence and witchcraft in meetings with Tex Watson, who then fulfilled the prophecy of this agent provocateur with all that shooting and stabbing. But Squeaky had never heard of Winans, Krassner wrote. A year later, according to his article, Krassner finangled a prison visit with 3 other Manson women and asked if they had known Winans. Susan Atkins replied, "Oh yeah, Tex Watson took me to sleep with him and he gave us dope." After the Rolling Stone issue hit the stands, a late-night phone call reached a modest home in San Antonio, Texas. "Charles, I just heard on the radio that a guy named Winans, a CIA agent, infiltrated the Manson family." What drawled the sleepy 35-year-old artist, Charles Winans, That can't be me. Go back to bed. In 1967, drawn by the California Dream, Charles Winans had moved with his wife and 3 children to Carmel Valley, where he tried unsuccessfully to earn a living as an artist. Throughout the late 60s, during the years of intense anti-war activity on the Monterey Peninsula, Winans had lived with the nightmare of being branded a suspected agent, a paranoid lie, he says. By 1975, he moved back to Texas. His wife had divorced him and remained in California with the children. When the suspicions that he was an agent surfaced in Rolling Stone, Winans said, "I just tried to block it out of my mind." In fact, it wasn't until February 1976, 4 months after the article appeared, that Winans saw a copy. Soon afterward, on a trip to Carmel to try and regain custody of his children, Winans asked an attorney to demand a retraction from Krassner and Rolling Stone. When they refused, standing by the story, Winans filed a libel suit. $450 million in damages is being sought, and the case has attracted superstar attorney Melvin Belli. At the beginning, Winans says, "I would have just settled for a retraction and let it go at that." Private detective Hal Lipset says Jan Wenner, editor of Rolling Stone, showed him a galley proof of a retraction shortly after the suit was filed. Francis Coppola's now defunct City magazine published an article by Krassner with similar information. City later published a point-by-point retraction in San Francisco magazine and settled with Winans for a reported $4,000, but the Rolling Stones retraction was never published, and Wenner denies showing such a galley to Lipset. Rolling Stone's chief attorney in the case is Jerry Dougherty of Pillsbury, Madison and Sutro, a powerful 220 law firm whose major clients include Standard Oil. Dougherty says he plans to show a substantial truth to allegations about Winans and prove the fact-checkers and editors of Rolling Stone did the best possible work in checking the facts before publication. Krassner first heard about Winans in 1972 from 54-year-old conspiracy researcher May Brussell. Brussell lives in Carmel Valley, on a hill overlooking the ranch home where the Winans and his family lived in the late 60s. According to Krassner, Brussell told him that Winans was a Naval Intelligence agent. Brussell said she heard Winans was taking classes at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey and believed that only intelligence officers could attend there. Therefore, Brussell reasoned, Winans was an agent. According to a school official, Winans, on welfare because of his modern realism and psychedelic artwork didn't sell in the Carmel tourist shops, worked as an illustrator at the school for 3 months under a federal assistance program. So you see, he wasn't even attending classes there. He worked as an illustrator for 3 months under a federal assistance program. Winans' alleged connection to the Manson family was furnished by Louise James, a friend of Brussels. James, an artist in her 50s, had lived next door to Winans and told Krassner that she had seen a strange man visiting the Winans in early 1969. She said she later recognized the visitor as Tex Watson from newspaper photos published after the Manson killings. Therefore, James reasoned, Winans was an agent who met with Watson to inspire the Manson killings. Louise James suffered a mental breakdown in 1972 and now lives in a board and care home. Other people in Carmel say that James, who was active in the Peace and Freedom Party and the anti-war movement, was extremely politically paranoid and all tensed up about the CIA long before she spoke with Krassner. May Brussell calls Krassner totally irresponsible for printing the statement about Winans without further confirmation, but she claims that the mere fact Melvin Belli is Winans' attorney is positive proof that Winans is an agent. Belli has worked for the CIA all his life, Brussell contends, pointing out that Belli represented Jack Ruby. I may have worked for the CIO, Belli responds, but not the CIA, he adds. She sounds like she's going to be an interesting witness. Convicted Manson family murderer Susan Atkins was another one of Krassner's sources. Atkins now claims she knew Winans and can't remember telling Krassner that she did. Krassner's fourth source was Hollywood television writer Stan Ross, who supposedly told him he'd seen Winans' name listed as an informant on an LAPD report. Ross now says that he never saw Winans' name on a police report and doesn't remember Krassner asking about Winans. When I said I thought of pleading insanity, I was serious, Krassner said. I was so crazy and paranoid when I was researching this that I remember riding in the back of a Greyhound bus, whispering into my ballpoint pen, Abby Hoffman, come in please, this is Paul Krassner, actually believing Abby would answer me. The Rolling Stone fact-checker who worked on the article, Bob Wallace, says he spent 5 to 7 minutes asking Krassner about his sources for the 6 paragraphs about Winans, and took Krassner's word for most of it because he knew Krassner to be a well-known journalist. But this article may have been an exception to Rolling Stone's strict fact-checking standards. After the suit was filed, Krassner says, a Rolling Stone editor told him that we were diving headfirst into part 1 of the Patty Hearst story, which ran in the same issue, says Krassner. There was a diversion in energy in terms of looking out for libel. If Rolling Stone is able to prove the truth of Krassner's statements about the complicity of military intelligence in the Manson murders, it will be the story of the decade. If they can't, the major battle in court will be over damages, actual damages to Winans' reputation and livelihood, and punitive damages claimed for Rolling Stone's reckless disregard for the truth. Winans claims that he had lost interest in sex, his artwork, and almost everything else as a result of the article. He also seeks compensation for his constant dread. An unjailed family Mansonoid would believe the allegation that he was an agent who had infiltrated the family and do him some grisly harm. Doherty will try to prove that Winans was not damaged at all by the article. He is also trying to have Rolling Stone legally classified as a newspaper, not a magazine, since the libel law makes a crucial distinction between the two. If Rolling Stone is held to be a newspaper, no punitive damages are awarded. If the libel party did not demand a retraction within 20 days of the actual knowledge of the libelous statement, but some courts have held that the retraction statute does not apply to magazines. Doherty has also asked the court summarily to dismiss Winans' claim for punitive damages, arguing that Rolling Stones held no actual malice for Winans. If either of these legal moves is successful, Winans will be eligible only for actual damages, which according to Doherty don't amount to much. Doherty says he can show that Winans' friend and fellow artist didn't believe what Krassner wrote about Winans. But Winans' attorneys contend that Rolling Stone was well aware of Krassner's reputation as a creative journalist and are seeking huge punitive damages for Rolling Stone's reckless disregard for the truth. Jane Wenner is romping around New York with Caroline Kennedy based on the money he makes on this magazine, says one of Winans' attorneys, Scott Hansen. He argues the facts are checked. When Rolling Stones writes about Jack Ford or Patty Hearst or Bill Graham, that Jan Wenner doesn't care about people he's never heard of, like Charles Winans, so they don't bother to check the facts. I think we ought to teach Rolling Stone a lesson. Right, so that's the end of that article. And so basically, yeah, they totally. I doubt he got the millions, but he probably got the smaller amount of damages from them, didn't he? And they just settled it out of court rather than go to court, because it would have been such a media circus. Bad. It would have looked bad for Rolling Stone because they didn't check the facts. So Rolling Stone stood to lose even more of their reputation, didn't they? When I was researching this, I was trying to find more information about this lawsuit, but all that comes up is another lawsuit that was recent against Rolling Stone, where they wrongly claimed someone had gang raped someone or something like that. Yeah, and so they get sued all the time for publishing the wrong things. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, we've got 53 minutes. So yeah, a lot to unpack there. Like I say, the article will be linked below. Read it and leave a comment for the guy, because he's put all this information together. And like I say, we'll carry on reading next week, because the week after next, because there's more about this. The woman who May Brussell claimed was drugged, but other people claim, yeah, she was just paranoid anyway. But yeah, we'll get more into her. But like I say, I found lots of evidence that he really was just an artist as well. He wasn't posing as being an artist. I've not seen hard evidence of it, but that's claimed so much. I think that is probably true. And May Brussell also lived nearby him. She at one point says she overlooked his house as well. So he did. I think he did live close to her. But it's like they were just watching him from outside. It doesn't sound like they knew him well. And the woman claimed she saw Charles Watson going into his house, but that could be mistaken identity, couldn't it? Just from seeing a photo of him in the paper, lots of blokes would have had hair that length, and Tex was actually average height for a bloke, wasn't he? So a lot of blokes the same height as him and that. Yeah, that's it. Hit the like button. Like I say, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. But yeah, there was a mundane reason why he was at the naval school. And he was actually in the Air Force as well, so nothing to do with the Navy. And he was a cryptographer, which is code breaking, isn't it? I think nothing to do with mind control. So he had no qualification to be sowing seeds of witchcraft and violence or whatever in Charles Watson. That's a big claim to make. Not a lot to back that up. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, because I said that. Yeah, that I found it. I found like when I was looking for articles about Rolling Stone getting sued, I saw, yeah, they just published the one story, yeah, and it wasn't true. Yeah. That's it. Yeah, but like I say, I was able to find some other articles. I won't read them out now because I've read out so much. I'll read this out another day. I don't. These are from around 1970. Another picture of him. You don't see that's with his daughter. He presumably had. And there are videos of him as well. But this is proof that he was doing art projects. And this article says he worked with Mercury Records, and he did Punch and Judy shows as well with his wife, and did puppet making workshops with children, which ties in with the videos that are on YouTube of him that look like they were done in the 90s. And there's one that was filmed when he was elderly as well. So not probably about 2006 or whatever. He died in 2007. And his obituary is online. Do I do my own graphics? Yeah. Yeah, I do. I use Canva, the website Canva, to make it. And obviously, screenshotting magazine articles. Yeah, if archive.org, if you just type in Charles Francis Winans, it comes up with a few articles. A few local newspapers. Most of them are just adverts advertising his exhibitions, but there's a couple of articles about him as well. So this proves he really was an artist. He wasn't just posing as being an artist. Like May Brussell repeatedly says that he was just posing as an artist and a hippie. But there's lots of people that say no, he really was a hippie. He was well known for being a hippie. And they said even his mother dressed hip, and his hair was long when he was young at school. Yeah, she mentions that. May Brussell mentions, that he was involved with Altamont as well. So yeah, it's interesting that he came in to represent this guy. Because he was just an artist, apparently. Why did he get that guy? So that is one suspicious thing, yeah. Yeah, I find pictures, and there's other graphics you can add. Like there's a lot of different things, yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting because there's things and that the guy says in video interviews he advocates people taking drugs and stuff like that when asked what advice he's got for young artists and that. I'll get into this next week though, because obviously we've been going too long now. This is an hour. I'll wrap this up in a minute and go to an after show. So I'm travelling tomorrow, so I've got to try and get to sleep early. But yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. And like I say, a lot to unpack. The articles I've already linked in the description anyway. And his obituary and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, this guy. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, hopefully it'll go smoothly. I'll bloody make the flight and fly without a problem and that, yeah. Should be alright though, just as long as I get there in time. We're staying in a hotel in the airport. So yeah, shouldn't miss the fucking flight. Should get there easily, yeah. 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 Yeah, so wrap this up now because we're just coming up to 60 minutes, and then I can do an after show for a little while. But yeah, there's a lot to digest there, and I'll make sure I put chapters into this one as soon as I can. And like I say, I might do some more shorts and other videos where I've done clips and compiled them and that while I'm away. See how much time I've got, yeah. Yeah, the Excalibur as well, yeah. Someone told me there's a place called Abraxas as well. a cafe called Abraxas in the middle of Amsterdam somewhere. So I've got to go to that now with that name. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you think it looks similar to what? Okay, yeah, it wasn't just a style at the time as well, though, when it was like psychedelic art, so it's bound to overlap. But yeah, I wonder if they shared any art exhibits. But apparently, his art didn't really sell well in California. He had more success back in Texas, by the sound of things. Yeah, yeah. No, I've never been to Holland before. No, I'm going. Yeah, this is the first time I've gone there. But yeah, other people have recommended places to me. There's a place called Excalibur, is there? Yeah. Yeah. Right, well, this is just dead on an hour now. Once I edit it down, it'll be shorter. But yeah, I'll wrap this up now, and I'll stop for a minute, and then I'll do an after show. So yeah, give me 5 minutes. Yeah. Went to Vegas, that's the thing. I don't know yet if I'll ever go to America. Who knows? I've got a passport now, though. That's it, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, if his art resembled Whittle Case, yeah. You can understand why it's not selling well, yeah. I don't know. Well, I like some of his art, though, yeah. Some of the art I've seen of his is quite nice. And he did, yeah, like to know exactly what posters and album covers he did and stuff like that. But yeah, I'll get more into him next time I do a stream because of all the other stuff I found that backs up. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but anyway, let me end this one now, and I'll start up an after show in a couple of minutes. Just give me a minute to stretch my legs and make more refreshments. Yeah, and I'll see, like I say, links to everything down below. Yeah, like the stream and subscribe. Thanks for coming. And good night. I'll be back in a minute.